when we started rolling back the individual state income tax rate, we did not do the same for the corporate tax rate. And this year we passed a bill that made sure that the corporate tax rate comes down and follows and stays with and will continue to roll back with the individual income tax rate reductions that we're having. Second thing, you know, our businesses and our personal lives can't thrive if we're not living in a safe environment. And we like to think we've got a great environment, and we do here, but the truth is gang violence is all across the state. It's not just in Atlanta, it's not just in the big cities. 2 years ago, I was honored to carry the bill that expanded the authority of the Attorney General to address gang violence. And so this year, one of the things we did was increase the budget to add 3 new additional centers around the state, one of which is in Macon, to specifically address gang task violence. 60% of violent crimes is related back to gang activity. And so it's something that we continue to face on a statewide basis because we're trying to make sure that all of us can enjoy what Georgia offers in a safe environment.
I'm proud that the biggest chunk of our budget every year goes toward education. It's about $14.1 billion. And we did get K through 12. And we did get $6 million in the budget this year for literacy coaches to go into our schools and help with our literacy rates and make sure that those are where they need to be. So I'm really proud of that point. They don't let freshmen be on appropriations or ways and means. So I have been in a 2-year process of learning and sitting in on meetings, and it's like auditing a class. They don't know us well enough to let us play with the money. So.
But let me tell you, she is laser focused on education, and she has really raised the bar for all of us to what she is pushing and doing for education in our state, and I appreciate it, Bethany.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's stay on education. I know one of the things Representative Blackman, I think you touched on, was $5 million appropriated to construct a regional STEM Innovation Academy here in Warner Robins. Can you share a little bit more about what was driving that and what the objectives are to come out of that?
Well, obviously we are, I think have been building our innovation footprint here in Middle Georgia, and I see Macon Middle Georgia State, here, and Central Georgia Tech is part of that. Our K through 12 system is an extremely important part of that, and I think what we recognize is that as things evolve, we're going to need a different skill set with all of the professions that we see, and things are changing very rapidly, and we wanted to work with our federal partners. We want to work with our local governments, and really excited about filling that pipeline moving forward with folks that understand and can be a part of that high-tech environment, that innovative environment. And I think just want to thank the senators and Representative Ballard, all of us here on stage, and I guess I'd be remiss in not saying that I know Representative Williams. We give him the same nod. He's not able to be with us today, and regrettably wanted to be. But I think it is a huge step in the right direction for us as we support the next generation of jobs that we're going to see being filled at Robbins, I think, and other places across Middle Georgia. So we hope that'll just continue our innovation presence here. And if I may say so, they don't give freshmen subcommittee chairmanships, and they don't usually let freshmen carry super important high profile bills, and Representative Ballard has done both of those things as a freshman. So I would congratulate her and really appreciate what she has been to this delegation and to this state.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. So we'll stay in the education realm for just a second. As Georgia faces significant opportunities to increase workforce participation and preparedness, the General Assembly responded by passing legislation to bolster education and workforce pipeline and expand opportunities for employment throughout the state. Representative Ballard, you touched on literacy. I would love to get your thoughts on some of the specific legislation around that, as well as the expansion of policies to increase second chance hiring and the Georgia's high demand career through K-12 education programs to increase participation education.
As far as literacy goes, last year I carried House Bill 538, which, you know, kind of revamped the way we look at literacy and how we teach that to our K through 3 kids. That's rolling out. The teachers who I talk to are really excited about doing great things for their children and making sure that they can read and read well. You know, if our kids aren't reading, they're not going to be able to work for you. They're not going to be able to be effective citizens. So that's our number one priority in school, is to make sure these children are reading. But we did do some work in looking at the high school, and I was on a study committee, and I always forget the name of it because it was like 10 words long. Like, why would you name a study committee that? It was looking at dual enrollment for high demand career fields and getting kids in there at younger ages and making sure that they'll be able to graduate and either get that have that certification before they graduate so they can go straight to work, or go on to a 4-year college. And what we learned in that study committee, we all sat in there and were extremely confused about the dual enrollment process. And some of the people in that room are way smarter than me. And I was never so happy as when one of them raised their hand and said, "I'm so confused by this process," because I was like, "Good, I'm not the dumb one." But what we took away from that is, if we were having trouble understanding how to navigate dual enrollment, then that meant our kids were having trouble learning how to navigate that. Parents were probably having trouble, and I thought to myself, I wouldn't be able to explain this to a child in my district, especially one who maybe didn't have parental support to help them. So our task in that was to simplify the dual enrollment process, and we are well on our way to doing that. We're simplifying the funding through the ACE grant program. And so this will help our kids be ready when they graduate to do what they want to do, whether that is go straight into the workforce, go to the military, go to a 4-year university. So I think that is what we are focused on as a body, is making sure our kids get what they need to be productive citizens.
Very good. And then finally, in education, unless y'all have another one y'all want to throw out, Senate Bill 233 got a lot of media attention. If you could just kind of share with us your thoughts on that, and maybe what it does and does not accomplish. Yeah, that was the Georgia School Promise. Yeah.
So in essence, what that bill does, and we've worked on for 3 years in the Senate, the House passed it. We're very grateful for them for passing it. It's commonly thought of as school choice. I really think it's more parent choice. And what it says is that a child's future is not going to be determined by their zip code. And children that are locked into a chronically failing school, meaning one that's in the bottom 25% of all the statewide schools, will now have an opportunity to avail themselves. The parents can have, if they enter into the Georgia School Promise program, a voucher, so to speak, not for full, but for $6,500, so that they can then, that parent, that family can make a choice to send their child to a different school system and hopefully get them out of the family school that they're in. That's something we've worked on for, as I said, for a number of years. We got great schools here in Houston County, but folks, there are some schools elsewhere in the state that are a real problem. And as Bethany was speaking to, what we now know more than ever, based on the focus on literacy, the focus on workforce development, and everything in between, is that the children that don't get a good basic education, their future is not what you want it to be for them. It's not what their parents want for them, and it's not what that child wants for them. And so this is to give them an opportunity to escape a failing school and have the same hopes and dreams that we have for all of our children.
Anybody else? Are y'all good? Okay. The other thing that I think was, that got attention here in the education space was the work that was done on pre-K funding for building facilities. Can any of y'all share a little bit about that legislation that went through?
We have not done an upgrade to pre-K in several years. It comes out of our lottery money.
We had a lot of pre-K, closed down, smaller, other classes unavailable. This puts money back into pre-K, smaller classrooms, more pay for those teachers, upgrading facilities, to try to, get more young people into pre-K. And I'm real proud of what we did. Pro Tem, Jan Jones over in the House really spearheaded that, and I think you're gonna see some real results in earlier child education in our state, which will pay dividends.
Well, I'm just gonna say that, I mean, Dr. Scott was an integral part of that process. I know he participated in some discussions. Nearly $60 million released from Georgia Lottery funds to support pre-K, just as Chairman Dickey just stated.
And, Pro Tem Jones, she highlighted Houston County as one of the leaders in this area. She mentioned us time and again. But, you know, it's important to build new facilities in some parts of our state, because it's not that parents don't want to send their children to pre-K, it's that a lot of areas in our state don't have a facility for parents to send their kids to.
Yeah, or adequate facilities, so that's a great point. So I mentioned earlier about the work that you guys do outside of session. Senator Walker, I know you spent probably more time than you thought you ever would on licensure, occupational licenses, and I know I had the opportunity to watch a number of those sessions outside of session last year and early into the year. Can you share with us, there were some improvements in that area? Share with us about what actually passed in this session, and then what's still on the horizon. As we talked about, there's a lot of things that didn't quite make it, but what's the future outlook for licensure?
Sure, well, thank you for that question. Yeah, I chaired a study committee over the interim between the 23 and 24 session to look at our licensure, occupational licensure system. We have 42 licenses under the Secretary of State, occupational licenses. We have other licenses in other agencies. We are ranked pretty poorly nationwide as far as the burden and burdensome licensing process we have in Georgia. So I was going to tackle that and solve that simple problem with just some common sense solutions. Little did I know that, and I really did kind of know going in, but every industry and every licensing board is fighting hard to protect their turf, and part of it is sort of creating barriers to entry for competition and that kind of thing. So it's not as easy as it might appear on the surface, but we did make some progress. The toughest battle I had, believe it or not, was on cosmetology and trying to make it to where you did not have to have a cosmetology license to shampoo and blow dry hair or apply makeup. You'd have thought I was the, Satan on that with some of these cosmetologists, but we did get that passed. Sadly, we had to take out flat irons and curling irons, because those are extremely dangerous apparently, and like you can do French fries at McDonald's in a boiling pot of grease, but you, by God, do not need to get a curling iron here. But we got that passed. But my caucus in the Senate took on a priority, and one of the ideas or concepts that my study committee came up with, we adopted it as a caucus priority, and we did get it across the finish line unscathed, and that was to create a seamless provisional license for folks. We have a big-time workforce shortage in Georgia, and so a lot of my bills had to do with mental health workforce and regular healthcare workforce. So if you've been a medic or a corpsman in the military, you have military certifications that are not recognized in the private sector. This bill that we passed would allow medics and corpsmen exiting the military to immediately go to work in the healthcare field based on their training and credentialing from the military on a provisional license, and they have 12 months to then get their regular license. So if they need to take a certain type of exam or get some more training, they can immediately go to work, be earning an income, be helping our healthcare workforce shortage, and hopefully, attract them to stay here in Georgia, and then, have that 12 months to get that done. So that was probably the one I'm most proud of. We did do streamlined licensing for land surveyors, made it a shorter apprenticeship for that, and changed some of the education timing on that. Soil scientists, we did a universal recognition for licensed marriage and family therapists, which is a mental health, will help with our mental health workforce. We did a social worker compact, and there was some others that related to nursing. So we were very, very busy on the licensure front. It's not very sexy or exciting, but it hopefully will help with our economic development, help spur entrepreneurship, and also help with our workforce shortage.
Yeah, absolutely, and I don't wanna overstate this, but I am so appreciative of your common sense approach to this. As you said, it is a very large undertaking, and from a chamber perspective, this is a barrier to entry. So whether it is starting a business or going to work in a business, the number of licensing boards, the number of hoops, and the time it takes for people to get the right credentials. There are certainly professions that we need to keep those stringent timelines and regulations, but other than curling irons versus hot fries at McDonald's, I honestly had no idea.
So let me just, on cosmetology, I learned that, so to go to school, it costs, the average cost is $17,600. So that industry certainly wants the licensure to stay in place, because they're making good money off these students. A lot of the students never finish. But the craziest thing is, you have to have, for certain cosmetology licenses, you have to have 1,500 hours of field experience or apprenticeship, whereas an EMT only has to have 150.
Wow.
So it's kind of wacky.
Wow. Well, I appreciate your leadership, and like I said, I know it's no small undertaking, so thank you for that. I have a feeling we're gonna be hearing updates on that for years to come as you continue to unravel that ball of yarn. So speaking of licenses, I think the bill that probably got the most attention, at least here in House and County, is House Bill 880. I'm gonna turn it over to Representative Ballard and let her just share a little bit about that process and the impact, because everybody on this stage was integrally involved in that program.
Yes, House Bill 880, we have tried for military spouse licensure, I think since before Larry and I were in the General Assembly. So we're following in the footsteps of others, but I spent a lot of the interim talking to Senator Kennedy's Chief of Staff, Charlie. We sat down a lot because I wanted to make sure if I could get it done in the House that we had really good Senate support. I talked to, every time I ran into a senator over the interim, I grabbed them and I started talking to them about it, and they were like, oh yeah, it's a good idea. And I said, I'm gonna remember you said that when it's time to vote. One of the biggest barriers I had to overcome in the House to get this done is I really think I had to do a lot of education, because unlike in previous decades where military service was the norm, military service is not the norm anywhere except the military community. We live it, we breathe it. Most people in Georgia don't know anybody who has served in the military or is currently serving, unless my grandpa was in World War II. So there was a lot of education. We had to really make people understand the economic need for that. And right now, as it stands now, and hopefully will be changing, military spouses, when they come here, are out of work between 6 and 9 months trying to get their license switched over so they can work. And I want you to think about being without half your family's income for 9 months. It would be really hard to do in our family. Like, that's just having everything cut in half. So it was really a mission, and I am going to give a big shout out to the Hub Chamber groups. I think I saw Cosby Johnson is coming next week. Without the Hub Chambers in all of our military communities throughout the state, I don't know that this would have gotten over the finish line. They rallied their community members. They talked to their elected officials. So that, it was really a statewide partnership to get this done.
And I'm gonna jump in, cause I know many in the room know what the hub chambers are, but many of you don't, so I'm gonna just put a pin in that for a second and let you finish. But we are very proud to be a member of, the Georgia Hub Chamber Council. That is a council of, chambers across the state of Georgia in communities outside of the perimeter, so outside of Metro Atlanta and what Metro Atlanta wants, that have their own MSA. And most of us also have a military installation in our footprint. So that's Houston County, Bibb County, Columbus, Augusta, Savannah, all of Athens. So a number of communities that rally together, all of our collective support in order to help move this legislation forward. So back to you, Becky.
So basically what this does, it will allow our military spouses who have an occupational license in another state to begin the process of getting their Georgia license before they move here. So when orders are cut and they have orders in hand that say they are coming to Georgia, they can start the process. Also, it will not allow these licenses to disappear into the deep dark hole that is the Secretary of State's office. There is a timeline. There is 30 days. Once the application packet is received, if there is no movement on that application packet within 30 days, the employer, y'all, can make the decision on whether to hire that person or not. And I know that the gentleman who cuts my hair and owns the salon, he is super excited about having a little more freedom to hire a master cosmetologist in his shop, because he says a lot of times by the time a girl gets her license in Georgia and he gets her all acclimated, it's time for her husband to PCS and move away. So, this is going to benefit, our economy throughout Georgia. There are 25,000 military spouses in Georgia, and most of them want to work.
Yeah, and so many of them are in those high demand careers and areas where you guys are struggling to hire. Many of them are skilled in healthcare or HR, a wide range of fields that we need them employed. Education, teachers and substitutes and things, and so many of them were either having to wait for long periods of time to get through this, and many of them are still underemployed based on their qualifications and having to forego those opportunities. So I want to thank our entire delegation for your leadership on that. That was a big win, not only for Robbins, but for the state of Georgia. And it also helps us in terms of future mission opportunities with Big Air Force. They're looking at these kind of things, and this is one of the things that makes Georgia even more competitive for those future missions at Robbins. So thank you, Bethany, for leading that charge, and thank you all for your support. So continuing to talk about things with a pro-business lens, Senator Kennedy, I know that you were involved in some of the significant changes with Senate Bill 426 regarding our state's legal environment and insurance rates. So I'm going to give you guys a chance to talk about that legislation for just a little bit.
Sure, thank you, April. So, one of the things we have struggled with for the last several years is tort reform issues. And I think most everybody in this room knows what I'm talking about, and it's the problem with a legal environment where the scales are not really balanced as they should be. And businesses sometimes face an uphill battle when they get sued and going into court. And so one of the things that we've been working on in trying to address, and I assume I don't have to explain to folks the problem that we're all having with increasing insurance rates, right? It's not just a problem of your homeowner's policy and your auto policy, but also your business-related policies. And that's further compounded by the fact that we've got insurers that are leaving the state. This has been particularly problematic for trucking companies. And trucking touches just about every aspect of business as we see. You don't have to get out on the interstate to know that. If you're in any sort of business, many of us are dependent upon the trucking industry to get the goods to us. So we passed a bill this year that changed what's called the direct action statute, which in essence is the way the law was written, allowed the trucking companies not only to be sued, but also the insurance company to be sued. And as you can imagine, that probably creates and does create a very unfair environment in favor of the plaintiff in suing the business when the insurance company is named and also there in the courtroom. And so this policy, this bill that we passed changed that to make it so that where it's more fair. Again, someone who's injured deserves their day in court and ought to get fair and just compensation. But we have a problem in this state. We are so proud to be multiple years now of the #1 state in which to do business. But last year, we wound up on the, quote, judicial hellhole list as #1. The #1 state in the union to be a judicial hellhole. And that means businesses, in essence, cannot get a fair shake in going to court when you're talking about tort cases. It's a problem. It's had a ripple effect. That's why you're seeing your insurance rates go up. That's why you're seeing it more difficult to get insurance policies written. And so we think this is the first step with the direct action statute to try to rebalance that and make it more fair. One other thing, April, if I can, I'll mention, and we had intended and hoped that we might have additional tort reform measures that would be dropped and argued and debated this year. And the governor's office is very interested in this. They have taken a very thoughtful approach and decided to study the data that is behind why we are the #1 judicial hellhole. And so I was honored to carry the bill for the governor's office when he asked that is going to study this for the next several months. In fact, the insurance commissioner is going to gather the data, make a report to the governor, make a report to the House, and make a report to the Senate. That should be very informative for us and kind of guide us so that we'll know next year as we go into 2025, how do we best fashion our next tort reform efforts so that we can make sure that businesses get a fair shake and that your insurance rates hopefully won't continue to skyrocket, and that insurance companies won't be looking to leave Georgia, but they'll be looking to stay in Georgia to create that competitive environment.
Very good. I'm glad you kept talking because you took my next question, which was kind of the future of, tort reform efforts. We saw the premise liability bill kind of flip-flop in session, and so that's an area that obviously directly impacts everybody in this room, and we certainly appreciate y'all's continued focus on that.
Yeah, we got more work to do, and I really appreciate Senator Kennedy's passion about it. And he's taken a great approach, but I appreciate it. But we got a lot more to do than that. That's one of my #1 priorities going forward is to try to get more of that passed next year.
Yeah, very good. So I was about to turn to you, Representative Dickey, and you always give us a great overview on the state of agriculture and movement and legislation related to that. I know there were a number of bills that you were part of this year. Can you share a little bit about that with us?
Sure. As House Chairman of the Agriculture Committee, I'm focused on good agricultural policy, and Houston County is a great agricultural county over here, and I'm proud of what's going on here. And I'm just trying to keep a good balance in our state. I know we've got a lot of great economic development going on with manufacturing.